Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I got again with me today is Brett Smith, entrepreneur, artist, editor, New York Times #1 bestseller. Thank you for joining me again today. I want to talk something a little bit different, maybe something controversial, but I really appreciate you coming on the show again.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here.
So I think you wear your heart on your sleeve. You're an avid Trump supporter. You know, you've been I believe a lifelong Republican.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was always, my family voted for Reagan. My mom was a lifelong Democrat, but still voted for Reagan. A lot of Democrats voted for Reagan. All you got to do is go back and look at the results of 1984, where Mondale won his home state, largely because Reagan didn't campaign there. You know, he later said that he wanted to leave Mondale with his dignity. Which was a nice gesture. But, we weren't necessarily like overtly political or anything like that. I kind of discovered that, my grandparents were all lifelong Democrats, Roosevelt Democrats, Harry Truman Democrats that don't really exist anymore, which is kind of like the Reagan Blue Dog Democrat that doesn't really exist anymore. Those are all Trump supporters now. But I kind of discovered, I think, my conservative bend maybe in the late 90s while we were going through the Clinton impeachment. And I started, I was like an avid Howard Stern listener. And for some reason, one day I tuned into Rush Limbaugh. And I started listening to Rush during impeachment. And he was kind of giving a breakdown on just the process of impeachment and sort of the machinations that the House and the Senate were going through. And I was kind of fascinated that the founders had thought about this 200 years prior. That they had thought about a situation like this that could arise and had a mechanism built into the Constitution to deal with it. And I was just kind of astounded that they could have the foresight to even contemplate something like that. And so then that sort of began my journey down this road of conservatism. And I kind of discovered that I had already had some conservative leanings. And I was a lot like Andrew Breitbart used to describe himself in his early 20s growing up in LA, in Brentwood. He was sort of a liberal by default. And I kind of described myself as that in high school. I was sort of liberal by default. I'm definitely left of center on certain things, when it comes to, I think, drugs, the war on drugs, prostitution, things like that. I'd like to see changed. And we've seen a lot of changes with those two things over the years with medical marijuana and decriminalization. Nevada obviously has the Bunny Ranch. So, I wouldn't say I'm a liberal. I would say I'm maybe left of center on certain things, but to a large degree, I've always been a right of center dude. But I would say that I'm pretty much kind of a centrist on a lot of things. I'd say I'm hard right on maybe military and, a couple other things. Adhering to the Constitution, I'm definitely one of these guys who believes that you should stick to the Constitution. I don't think that it should be a living, breathing document that changes over time. So in that sense, I want to conserve what we have there. So, but Rush was kind of the guy that sort of started to awaken things within me that were already there that I didn't really realize were necessarily conservative. That's kind of how that started for me, but it's never been something that's been like, I don't know. It's nothing like at the center. It's never been at the forefront of my personality. It's like those topics come up. I was always sort of the, especially in high school and in college, I was definitely sort of the lone right of center voice amongst the group because I did go to art school and it was dominated by
speaking of art school, it's dominated more left people. Also, the art industry, the arts in general, when you go in that as be a vocation, the leaning is more left. You being more of a centrist or more to the right. What was the industry like when you came in with because everything's so divided right now. Was it always like this, or was there a time where you could have a difference of opinion and people would still accept you?
You could, and you know, when I came in the late mid '90s, Brian Polito didn't give a shit who I voted for. I don't think politics ever came up with Brian or the guys at Chaos. We never really talked about that kind of stuff. It just didn't matter. You know, he hired me on merits. He hired me because I showed up every day, because I turned my work in on time, because I did good work, because I listened to what he had to say and wanted about 99% of the time. There was a couple times where I deviated and we kind of knocked heads, which then initially got me fired from Chaos, which is a funny story and for another time. But it was never an issue, man. You know, even with my work in advertising, doing storyboards for national and regional television ad campaigns, nobody cared. You know, they still don't care. You know, they want you to perform and show up on time or show up early, and that's it. Josh Blaylock, when I went to work, when I went to work for Hi-Fi. Hi-Fi color design after I got out of college, Brian Miller didn't care what my politics were, and I was kind of the lone conservative in that studio. Brian Buccellato, Jason Keith, Val Staples, Steve Cobb, Brian and Christy Miller, they were all Democrats. They were all kind of left of center people. Brian and Christy are probably more center left than hardcore left, but they didn't care. They wanted me to do a good job and represent Hi-Fi with my best work, so we could retain our clients and keep them happy. And you know, this is prior to there being social media, so you know, nobody really knew, you know, what artists' political leanings were to begin with. So there wasn't a platform for them to be spewing them out there or putting them out there. And then on top of that, nobody cared. You know, it just wasn't an issue. It was not a marquee issue like it is today.
So, you know, is there a specific time or an event where you realize, well, maybe being so open about my beliefs, you know, political leanings, maybe isn't healthy for this for being in this work environment? Maybe it, you know, could get maybe in a little bit of trouble. You know, was there a moment when that happened, or did it just happen over time?
I think it started to happen under sort of as Bush was going out of office and Obama came into office. It seems like things got hyper political during Obama, because I never had any problems getting hired. I never had any problems getting work under Bush. You know, it seemed to me like under Obama, things got more heated and things got more ratcheted up, and those types of things people paid more attention to. You know, also under Obama, you had Facebook. And, you know, I remember jumping on Facebook somewhere around 2008, 2009. And, you know, I just kept my feed to, I looked at other artists, and I looked at Josh Blaylock, and I looked at other guys that I had been friends with in the industry. Most of their feeds were all basically politics free. You know, they only talked basically music, comics, movies, pop culture. So I kept my feed basically politics free. I didn't wade into that kind of stuff. And also I knew that, you know, I was raised as a Gen Xer. Most of us were raised that you don't talk about certain things in polite company, sex, religion, politics. These are kind of things that you just you stay away from. And then, you know, when Obama was in office, maybe like around, you know, closing in on his last couple of years, maybe his last year of his first term, things started to get really hyper political. And I saw all these people in my industry and elsewhere talking politics, and they're all on the left to a large degree. And there started to pop up private groups on Facebook, which were dominated by conservatives, people who were in the entertainment business, whether it's advertising, movies, comics, music. And these were places where we could all go and talk and vent without being outed. And And I got sick of that. I really got sick of that because I felt kind of like, why can't I be myself? How come all these leftists can be who they are in the open on Facebook? And I've got to shut up about my beliefs. This is America. This isn't Russia. This isn't the Soviet Union. I should be able to voice my opinion worry-free on Facebook and on social media and out in the open, the same as these Obama supporters. And so I slowly started to do that, little by little. And I noticed that, it would get me usually in hot water, which I thought was a huge double standard and incredibly duplicitous and hypocritical. And even people who I had worked with at Devil's Due, like Mike Norton and Tim Seeley, who were completely accepting of my politics when I lived in Chicago and used to hang out with those guys. Those guys made me feel at home when I moved out there. They didn't care that I was a Bush supporter. They didn't care that I was in favor of going over to Iraq and kicking ass and taking names. At that time I was. So those guys kind of shunned me, and others, of their political persuasion also started to kind of shun me and on social media. And I saw other people, guys like Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan, those guys continue to get shunned. Graham posted the other day about how people, the left are losing their minds over Rush Limbaugh getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And Graham made this post saying, hey, where were you guys when Lorne Michaels, and some of these other ultra leftists got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, because none of us conservatives spoke up when that happened. We just said, Obama can give it to who he wants to give it to. Who cares? But when it's a person that's a conservative who gets it, they all lose their minds. And that's the kind of double standard that I have a real problem with, and it's also, the left will post on Facebook all day long, and they'll vent and they will voice their displeasure of the president. And I won't say anything, Graham won't say anything, Chuck won't say anything. I don't care. It's not important to me. If they want to have their own voice, they should have it. This is America, and everyone should be able to speak their mind openly and freely and without the fear of a backlash or a blacklist or reprisals.
Yeah. So speaking of reprisals, what is the environment in comics today? Do you think that you can? Are you still as employable within the industry as you were before?
No,
you still have the same skill set. You still have the same portfolio. You still have the same quality of work, but you don't believe
it's better. I mean,
less doors are open to you now.
I am 10 times the colorist as I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago because I'm better at my craft. I'm faster. I'm better. I perform better. And those opportunities are gone. And those opportunities evaporated after I adapted Clinton Cash into a graphic novel into 2016, and which helped Trump get elected, which convinced a lot of millennial voters who read it to either jump ship from Bernie and vote for Trump or sit on their hands or vote for Jill Stein. But, the one thing that graphic novel, the effect that it had on the people who read it, who were on the fence, was there's no way in hell I'm voting for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And if you read that book, if you read that graphic novel, you understand how corrupt the Clintons are and have been for years, going back to the 90s. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, really, it goes back to Bill's time as Arkansas governor. I mean, watch American Made with Tom Cruise, and you'll see how corrupt Bill Clinton was, and I'm not going to give it away. It's a great movie. But these leftists vent all day long, and then when Graham vents a little bit, these people who never show up in his feed, that he never hears from, all of a sudden show up and castigate him and say, "Oh, well, Rush is a racist," even though they've never listened to 5 minutes of his show. They're just repeating some talking point that they heard on MSNBC. And that's the rub, man. I mean, these people never contribute to his posts. They never They never say anything, but yet when he voices one little peep, which goes against their way of thinking, they just lose their minds. And that is the kind of petulance that drives me crazy. And, you know, it's also the kind of petulance that you see with guys like me and Chuck and Graham, who have largely been blacklisted from the industry because we are vocal and we are unabashedly pro-Trump. You know, we love Ronald Reagan. You know, we love conservatism. We love the founders. We love everything that is inherently good about America. And, you know, comics, getting a job in comics has always been, has always had an element of politicking. Okay. Whether you are just going to the cons and schlepping your portfolio from editor to editor, or from artist to artist, if you're a colorist, you're trying to get work, or if it's going to the bar after hours and hanging out and kissing Joe Quesada's ass, you know, or kissing this editor's ass. You know, it used to be you go to the bar and you just, you know, you'd have a good time and you'd meet people and you'd shoot the shit. But at the same time, that's all politicking. And that's the kind of stuff that I just kind of got sick of. You know, I want people to, I mean, I realize that getting hired is about personal relationships. Okay. And that's fine. And I don't have a problem building rapport and building a personal relationship with an editor, even if it means me going out and politicking in that sense. But when it comes to who I vote for, that's none of their business. It has nothing to do with my work. It has nothing to do with me showing up on time and kicking ass and taking names when it comes to meeting and beating deadlines and making them look good to their boss. Because that's all I've ever done for Marvel and DC and the editors that I've worked for. I make the assistant editors and the editors that I've worked for look great to their managing editor and to Joe Quesada, Dan Buckley, and Ike Perlmutter. And that's really what it's about. You know, I mean, you're helping them keep their job. You know, that's the corporate mentality you had to deal with even prior to Marvel being owned by Disney. Now it's a corporate mentality which is just off the charts. You know, and frankly, the fact that I have been blacklisted from Marvel and largely DC doesn't bother me anymore, because frankly, the pay sucks, the deadlines suck, the artwork that you work on sucks even more. We talked about that yesterday as far as the standards. So it's just kind of like, you know, is there a future here for people like me? Not really. You know, and that's why the creator-owned industry, the crowdfunding, you know, the graphic novels that I work on and that I produce, which are independently financed, you know, that's really the future. And, you know, it's nothing lasts forever, dude. You know, that's the thing. You know, it's like, you know, I've had a 24-year career in this business, and I've taken it, you know, as a colorist, and I've taken it, you know, further than probably any other colorist has in the business. As far as, you know, I transitioned from being a colorist to a book packager, basically, in 2016, when Steve Bannon and Peter Schweizer came to me and said, hey, we want to take Peter's book, Clinton Cash, and turn it into a graphic novel. How do we do that? And I said, well, you know, if you hire me, you know, you'll have a good shot at turning it into something that could be a bestseller and something that can find its way to a younger demographic of voters, which is something that conservatives had never done up until that point. You know, conservatives the right don't appreciate the arts, and they don't really support the arts. So what I did, and what I did with my team, Chuck Dixon, Paul Revos, Sergio Cariello, Graham Nolan, Don Hudson, and Taylor Esposito, what we did on Clinton Cash had never been done before. It's probably the most subversive thing that the right has ever done within pop culture. To this day, there's nothing that you can point to that the right has done within the culture war that's even close to Clinton Cash. And from a creative standpoint, and from the standpoint of success, us turning it into an Amazon #1 bestseller and a New York Times #1 bestseller. Yeah, and I'm very proud of that. And it's kind of like, I knew, dude, that if I did this, I was either going to win big or I was going to lose big. I knew that I was either going to be blacklisted if it was successful, or I was going to be blacklisted if it was not successful, because Chuck and I had that conversation. You know, we had that conversation right in the beginning. He said, look, you know, if you do this, these are these are the scenarios which could potentially happen for you. These editors you've been working for and have been performing for and performing well for, they're largely going to stop talking to you. They're not going to email. They're not going to respond to your emails anymore. And that's largely what happened. With the exception of 2 people, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to put them under the microscope. But there's 2 editors who continue to work with me. One of which left DC for another publisher, and another girl who kind of took off and then came back. And those 2 people I love and respect beyond words because they continue to accept me for who I am, which is a nice guy and an affable guy and an easy guy to work with, and somebody who can perform and perform well and make them look good and help them get their book out on time, which is ultimately my job. Who I am outside of that shouldn't matter, frankly. But I think social media has made this a bigger problem than I'm sure this element always kind of existed, because Chuck used to tell me that even in the 80s, he would kind of bump heads. And in the 90s, he would bump heads with editors about politics. But that old guard, those boomers, the Danny O'Neills and the Jim Shooters, it was not a marquee issue for them. They wanted the best creative possible on their books, and they were mindful of what the fans wanted. And if the fans wanted Chuck Dixon, I don't think that they cared what Chuck Dixon's politics were. But, you can talk to Chuck and he'll tell you at some point in time it did become an issue. And he was blacklisted for Marvel. He and Graham are back doing, they came back for the Bane series. And I think Chuck is back doing something for DC right now. So, which is great. And just goes to show you that the politics shouldn't matter. This is about story, and it's about the connection that these writers have with these characters, of which resonates with fans.
Yeah,
so
talking about fans and readers, one of the comic book industry is shrinking as far as an audience goes, and one of the big complaints we hear is we're no longer getting social commentary. Writers are no longer asking the reader to think or making them think about a situation, or are you sure how you feel about this? They're trying to tell them how to think. Right. So it's more like propaganda right now. We saw it, obviously in the lead up to 2016. I imagine it's only going to get worse. At what point is there a breaking point where the propaganda and over politicizing a character like Batman, it just becomes too much?
Boy, that's a great question. You look at this Birds of Prey movie, which has just bombed. It absolutely bombed. I think they clocked in somewhere around 40 million over the last 2 days, this opening weekend. People are rejecting this feminist cinema, this woke cinema. They don't want to watch it. Not even the girls want to go watch it, frankly. And I don't blame them, because it's just utter nonsense and garbage. It's virtue signaling, I don't know. I look at things like the New York Times and I look at CNN. These entities are bleeding audiences. They're not making any money, and they just continue down this road of this recipe of propaganda, which is, day in and day out, the same crap. And they don't really seem to care that nobody's tuning in. It seems to me that the message is more important than sales or ratings. The message is more important than ticket sales. I watched that Joker film, which I thought was just a hot steaming pile of garbage. I thought it was crap. I wasn't interested in, even in the beginning when I saw the previews, I was just kind of like, why would anybody want to go see a movie about the Joker without Batman? That just doesn't even make any sense to me. But it's basically like this art house film, this high budget art house film with, disguising itself as a comic book movie, and it's like, even when I saw, Zorro the Gay Blade on the marquee in the movie, I was just like, this is not a serious comic book movie. This movie is mocking Batman in a lot of ways, but it's got this message that it wants to put forward about toxic white masculinity and, all this left of center psychobabble bullshit. And it's just nothing that I'm interested in. I watched Ford versus Ferrari. I've watched it 4 times over the last 4 days. Watched it every night, pretty much. Last night I fell asleep about halfway through. That's because I stayed up too late. Fantastic movie. What a triumph. What an absolute triumph. And I've been a big James Mangold fan since Copland. I went and saw Copland on opening night because I didn't know anything about James Mangold, but I looked at this cast and I was just like, oh my God, how can you not go see this movie? And plus Sly gained 40 pounds for this role, But Ford versus Ferrari is just a beautiful, purely American movie. It's about nonconformity. It's about innovation. It's about competition. It's about fathers and sons and husbands and wives. It's got this great message, this beautiful pro-American, pro-Western message. And I just think to myself, comics used to have that because comics are an American creation. They're an American innovation. And they're American mythology. And they used to be black hat, white hat. They used to be good versus evil. And, once the left sunk their claws into entertainment and comics, everything just became not only turned upside down, but also just this huge wash of gray. And I don't mind a little bit of gray. I don't mind a little bit of moral ambiguity here and there. It can make things interesting. You watch a movie like Dragged Across Concrete, which has some moral ambiguity to it, but that's a great movie. What's his name? Zoller is a fantastic filmmaker. Cell Block and Brawl in Cell Block 99, killer movie. I mean, this guy, in Mangold, it's like with Ford versus Ferrari. That movie's a throwback. It's a real throwback to the 80s and the 90s, those types of movies. But it's like that's the kind of storytelling that I miss. That's what we used to get in comics, those kinds of stories. And now it's all just kind of pandering to this audience that doesn't exist. And not only that, they're pandering to an audience that doesn't buy comics and doesn't purchase movie tickets. Where is the left supporting Birds of Prey? Nowhere to be found. Nobody gives a shit about that movie. And yet they made it for those people. So, as far as Marvel and these editors and these Hollywood producers, they're a bunch of suckers because they think that this stuff is going to resonate when it doesn't. Nobody cares. Ewan McGregor goes out there, oh yeah, this film's about misandry. Who cares, dude? That's not why people go to the movies. People go to the movies to escape and to be entertained and to be taken into places where their imagination can't afford to go, or is limited in going. So, I believe that as storytellers, our job is to inspire. Stories need to be inspirational, aspirational. And I just look at the left, and there's such a bunch of petulant, sad, angry people that when you have that attitude, it's impossible to inspire people. It's impossible to be aspirational. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said recently, she was struggling with the metaphor of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. We saw this the other day where she's like, it's impossible to pull yourself. Just like, okay, it's a fucking metaphor, lady. Okay. Go to work. This country, the founders bootstrapped this nation. Okay. That is the core tenet of America, is self-start. Is rugged individualism and hard work, and never giving up, man. You never give up. It's that great line from Heartbreak Ridge, Clint Eastwood. You adapt, you improvise, you overcome. You're a military guy. You know that. And that's what my grandfather taught me. Battle of the Bulge survivor. That's what my dad, Vietnam volunteer in the Air Force, taught me. You never give up. You improvise, you adapt, you overcome. But you never quit. You never quit, and that is the credo of this country, and that's inspirational. You aspire, to that level of, I think of, of that America. If you want to capture the American dream, that is the road. And so I'm listening to AOC go on this rant, about this and pissing and moaning about this metaphor, and I just think to myself, wow. A bartender from the Bronx, middle-class bartender, pulled herself up by the bootstraps and got 15,000 people to vote for her, unseated the man who was second in line to Nancy Pelosi. And she has the audacity to go out there and say that people can't pull themselves up by the bootstraps when she herself is an example of that. And she doesn't even she doesn't even see it. She doesn't even see herself as that. So, you know, that doesn't help people want to vote for them. And it certainly doesn't help customers and potential customers, whether it's in the local comic book shop, whether it's on Comixology, digital, whether it is in the movie theater, want to buy products that also subscribe to that kind of negative, petulant, pessimistic crap. And you know, and that is one of the biggest problems within entertainment right now. You know, there is a soft bigotry of low expectations, you know, and we need to expect more out of the creators. And frankly, they all need to start telling inspirational, aspirational stories which lift people up and make people feel good, you know, because that's how you keep people coming back for more, you know. And if it's just all negative, male bashing, woke nonsense, that might work as a shtick for a while, but you're going to burn people out. And I think people are starting to finally get burned out on this stuff. You look at the Charlie's Angels movie, bombed. Elizabeth Banks out there saying, oh, this is feminist cinema. Well, nobody wanted to go see your feminist cinema, but everybody wanted to go see Mick G and Carmen Diaz and what's her face from E.T. Who the hell? Lucy Liu. You know, the original Charlie's Angels reboot. Yeah. You know, that thing made like $200 million.
Yeah.
And it had hot chicks in it. You know, and even when they dialed back the violence in the second one, you know, Drew Barrymore was like, you know, I don't want a whole lot of gun violence in here. I want more kung fu and fight scenes and stuff like that. So they dialed back the gun violence, but people still went and saw it because they wanted to see attractive, hot women beating the crap out of the bad guys and saving the day. You know, this is not brain surgery. These are the types of stories that have been told from, you know, like the Homeric times, you know, sitting around a campfire and retelling the Odyssey or, the Crucible or what, you know, I mean, Shakespeare. This goes back to the caves of Lascaux. These are the kind of stories that we tell throughout the ages, you know. I mean, how would they reboot Clash of the Titans today? How would Clash of the Titans be a woke tale?
What do we want to think about it? I saw the last reboot and it wasn't very good.
Yeah, I mean, I did think the Sam Worthington one, the first one I thought was pretty cool. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought the second one was too much CGI. But you know, I'm of the generation that watched Harry Hamlin in 1981, and you know, and had all that great Ray Harryhausen stop motion. I still love that film. You know, with Laurence Olivier as Zeus, find and fulfill your destiny. You know. Think about that. Find and fulfill your destiny. That's every man. That's every woman out there. That's the hero's tale. You know that. Luke Skywalker staring out at those two suns in that first Star Wars. You know that's everybody. That's every dude and every gal in every town, small town, big town, that wants to get out and discover the world and conquer. Realize their dreams or discover them. Maybe they don't even know what they are yet. You know, these are inspirational, aspirational tales. You know, they touch us deep inside because that is, in a lot of ways, the human condition. And, this woke, left of center, communist crap that we get out of the entertainment industry is antithetical. It's the antithesis of all that stuff, which is why it doesn't resonate on a large scale. It just doesn't. And it's like I said, it can function as a shtick for a certain time, and now it's starting to get burned out. And I just watched Bill Burr's Paper Tiger on Netflix. Everybody should go watch that. You know, that guy's hilarious to begin with, but he just absolutely takes a flamethrower to the PC culture and to the woke feminist culture. And this is a performance he did over in the UK, and people are just going crazy for it. They're absolutely elated to have somebody finally get up and speak the truth. So I hope that there will. I think this whole thing is kind of running its course, and people are starting to back away from it from the standpoint of purchasing tickets and buying comics. But I hope that there's a backlash amongst creatives to where we start to get stories that go the opposite direction and start to tell the kind of stories that you and I grew up with, which people bought, you know, and turned out for in droves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they don't. You look at CNN. It's like I said. You look at CNN. You look at the New York Times. They just continue down this road, this myopic road, regardless of ticket sales, regardless of people, you know, buying their paper. It's you know, or ratings. It's bizarre.
I agree with you, Brett. I want to thank you so much. You know, we're at 35 minutes now. We're gonna have to call it. I know you love talking about this. We could do an hour and a half on this.
We could,
without a doubt. And we'll definitely revisit some of these themes and talk about it some more. We're definitely going to have you on the channel again. Cool. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Later.
All right.